So we're just doing this little review, okay? There are 3 slides that we're going to talk about that were from the first session, or that at least we're going to scroll past. That the first session, the whole point was that everybody comes out of the first session knowing, okay, I've got some things to work on, and these are what they are. So the idea would be everybody's got 3 things they're working on in their marriage. Okay, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's more. But we really encouraged you to actually ask God. Ask God for guidance. Please do that. To ask yourself, you probably know some things you should be working on. Ask your spouse. That's a super valuable source of good things to work on. And then we gave a bunch of ideas, and one of the sources of ideas was from our marriage pyramid. Okay, we include this slide in every single one of our presentations. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. The point is, though,
unless this is brand new for someone, but it might be self-explanatory.
So they can listen to the old ones, but I'm just gonna briefly introduce it. Right, that the way that Susan and I look at Christian marriage is like this pyramid. The foundation is super important to be great friends. And great friends is another term for unconditional love. Okay, really super unconditional love. But your relationship started out as a great friendship, and unfortunately we sometimes get into counseling situations with people who've been married a while and they're having troubles and they totally neglected / lost the friendship. So keeping the friendship alive is super, super important. It's the foundation of everything. Before I was married, I thought this is fantastic. After I'm married, I'm going to have a built-in discipleship partner who's not going to let me get away with anything. And it's like, that is totally not what marriage is about. You know, your spouse is not your accountability partner to, make sure that you're spiritual. They're unconditional friends and lovers, and they're there to encourage you, to build you up. So being great friends is the foundation. Now, a lot of things that you might hear at like a marriage retreat or marriage class or whatever are ways to improve how you work together. Okay, so that's being better partners. So on top of being great friends is great, and that's usually what you are a lot of when you're dating. But then you get married and there's all kinds of stuff to do together. So we need to learn to be great partners together. And I enumerate a handful of areas, to be great partners in ministry, household, tasks, finances, children, careers and future, life and family plans, extended family. And then to be great lovers. Okay, so we're going to be talking about that in the next 3 sessions, but we're not going to really, it's not like anyone's going to be teaching anyone about being great lovers. What we're going to do is talk about the communication glitches that maybe get in the way of that, or things that you should be communicating about so that you guys can figure out how to be great lovers. Each couple's different. And so anyway, that had a lot of opportunity to choose, we should work on that. Or, again, this is all from the first session where we're talking about how do we decide on the things that we're going to work on,
right,
that we're going to focus on.
Interesting exercise to take that marriage pyramid and think, okay, out of this, where are our main conflicts? And a lot of times they're in the partners area, where just, housework, bills, all of that kind of stuff. How do you handle that? But if you look at that, that'll probably let you know what areas are the most challenging. Yeah.
Yep. Here was another source of how to identify what we're going to work on. These are the 10 marital needs that are identified in His Needs, Her Needs, the book. From his counseling practice, these things clearly fall into his needs and her needs. But they've gotten some feedback over the years that, well, this one, this one that's normally classified as his need is really the biggest need for her. And this one, which is normally classified as a her need, is really the biggest need for him. Mm-hmm. So it's not that these things are exclusive. It's that here's this basket of 10 marital needs that are very, very common that he sees in his marriage counseling practice. And so he wrote a book about it, just explaining it and how if people really take care of one another's marital needs, then they can be in love for a lifetime. The saying goes, right? Oh, yeah, you're in the honeymoon phase. Just wait. It'll get boring and stiff and cold and
So negative.
and negative.
Yeah.
Right. And his position is, if you keep meeting one another's marital needs, you'll be in love for a lifetime. So that sounds good to me. Yeah, super encouraging. Super encouraging. Someone who has made his career ambition to improve marriages, and he sees a lot of people in a lot of different places. Okay, so our second session was about establishing great habits of communication, and we talked about in these three areas. It's really important. It's really important to have a daily habit of good communication, to have a weekly habit of good communication, and then to have a good habit that you can talk about anything at any time as needed, right? Because sometimes things will come up. And then on this slide, we also talked about, things we're trying to accomplish by having good habits of communication. And so those are a set of great ideals or descriptive words describing what is it we're trying to do by being good communicators. And also in that session, we talked about that communication is sort of this spine along the edge of the marriage pyramid, that growth in anything begins with good communication. Because growth in marriage is fundamentally a growth in a relationship, and relationships don't grow without communication. So there are all these different areas to grow in, but it's going to be through communication that you do it. So Susan and I talked about how, we have our daily habits, like when we're getting ready for bed, and we're talking in the bathroom as we're getting ready for bed. We talk in the morning when we get up and we're getting ready for the day. There's some times where I'm working from home, but I'm on a break in between meetings or something, and I just have something from my quiet time or something that's on my heart that I really want to talk to Susan about. And she's moving around. She says, "Can you follow me around the house?" Yeah. And she'll be like doing laundry or whatever, and I'm following her around the house talking. I mean, we just have tried to develop good habits of daily communication. So communication that's just ongoing, that it happens daily. Not that it happens all day, but that there's a good conversation at least every day. Mm-hmm. And if you have that, then things don't build up, they don't boil over. Having good daily communication is important, which gets us back to the weekly. Now, do you know what that means? That means like a standard time that you have in the week, that you sit down and maybe you go over your schedule book together, or your schedules together. You go over certain long-term issues that you maybe didn't cover in your daily conversations. You may talk about a family vacation that's coming up, and you got a plan, whatever. There are things that you have to talk about that don't come up in daily conversations. And you need to have a time where you can talk about anything. We centered around our schedules. So we pull out our schedule books. We talk about the upcoming schedule for the week. And oh, by the way, if you're going to have a ministry together, you've got to do this, because you can't reach out to another couple without communicating and planning and so forth. But there's a lot of things that you do as partners that need good conversations, whether it's things you really need to do better with the kids, things that you need, there's just a lot of things that you need a good weekly communication time. So for Susan and me, it's Sunday afternoon or evening that we get our schedule books. We go through our schedules. And in our schedule books, we also have various life goal areas that remind us to think about topics that we wouldn't otherwise get around to, that we should probably talk about. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we want to grow in our relationship with our family? Our extended family.
Right. Or even just as simple as, hey, are we taking a vacation this summer? How are we going to handle that? Or, we haven't spent much time with your family. How are we going to see them? Or, whatever it is. So,
yeah. So there are a lot of things we cover in our weekly communication habits. So that's just really recommended. And then as needed is just, right, are you open to, and do you have an established pattern where one person can say, I'm kind of feeling like, and in fact, that's what our lunch conversation was. I was feeling like, some things just haven't been going well, and I just wanted to talk about it between us. Let's just sort this out. I was apologizing for this or that, for me being negative about me perceiving her being negative, and it was just a mess. So I just had to apologize for it and sort it out. In that case, it was an as-needed talk. So I initiated it because I needed to talk and confess and apologize. Okay, good. We encourage everyone to be having these good habits of communication. What could go wrong, right? We're communicating, we're talking now. What could go wrong? Well, maybe you don't agree with each other. Maybe you get your feelings hurt. Maybe you don't understand one another. Even though you're communicating, you don't understand. Maybe one of you or both of you get defensive. What if one of you thinks thoughts as a result of a conversation that the person who initiated the conversation didn't mean for them to have at all? So you have a conversation, you're working out some things, you walk away thinking, man, she just really has a problem with me. That's not what that conversation was about at all. It was, hey, I really love you, and let's not let our conflicts fester or whatever. Or you bring up something and your spouse brings up completely unrelated things. So you end up not talking about the things that you really wanted to and needed to talk about, but you end up, going on all kinds of tangents that just bring up more and more conflict, right? And by his or her response, you end up getting hurt, frustrated, or angry. So these are possible. Now, no one recognizes these things, do you? Yeah, we all kind of recognize communication is tricky. Good communication is tricky. This was a slide where we were just reminding ourselves that one of the pitfalls in marriage is that we want to fix the other person. In fact, we may have even gone into marriage thinking, well, he's 75% good, so we're gonna go ahead with this, but I just really need to fix the other 25%. Okay, and that can be a pitfall, because when one of you is feeling like my spouse always just wants to fix me, they just see the negative, then that ends up being a real problem. Okay, and so we talked about being able to let go of the idea that I'm responsible to fix my spouse, but still understanding that God could use you to be a positive influence. Okay, but it's a completely different mindset. So we talked about that, and I just wanted to remind people about that. I think that was from session 3. Oh yeah, and I want to touch on this one. we talked about this last time, which was what Susan and I call the four most important times of the day. And what these is just a way of looking at how to make one another feel special. If you could focus on making one another feel special when you first wake up, just before the first one of you heads out the door to work, just after the second one of you arrives home after work or any time you've been out, and just before the first one of you goes to bed. If you could just make a special effort to pay attention to each other, to give each other a kiss, whatever, to give each other a kind word, to make one another feel special at these 4 opportunities of the day, those are, if you think of each of them as a little 5-minute special time, that's 20 minutes you will absolutely find was a worthwhile investment in your day.
Have any of y'all ever heard of that before or seen that? But it's, when you talk about the daily communication, and that is not, okay, we've talked, I don't have to talk to them for the rest of the day now because we had but this is that connection several times a day, and this really promotes more emotional intimacy because you're checking in with each other, you're like, and definitely, I don't know if y'all have ever had roommates and you're leaving the house and you say bye and you realize everybody's already gone and nobody said goodbye to each other. But yeah, we definitely don't want that. But it's just that connecting. And then, it's funny, if y'all were new marrieds, but when in the world, a lot of times, they meet someone and then they go out together every single night until they're engaged, and then they get married, and then they don't really know how to keep the relationship up when real life is in effect because they dropped all their friends when they met someone, and they got too busy to be with their friends or something. But having this is a real important way. Even when you're busy, you still stay emotionally connected. And it's really, and if you think about it, when you have kids, just Gio, how was school? And connecting it with him before, it's just natural. When you have children that are getting Raymond, Gio's age, that you kind of do that anyway. But doing this with each other.
So with our final minute,
yeah, okay, yes.
Let me just introduce you to a new concept that deserves another half hour. But okay, this is what I call love statements. Instead of accusing, you never do this, or I don't feel respected by you, right? There's something really important is that if you want something out of your relationship, you need to take responsibility to articulate it. But how do you do that in a way which isn't complaining or negative or critical? And this is just a format, a potential suggested format. You might try it, okay? In other words, when such and such is going on, the more this happens, the more I feel loved. Doesn't that sound like a very warm, in other words, if it was like my wife comes home and she doesn't, I'm working in the back and I don't even know that she's home. She doesn't come say hi to me, okay? Right. I might say, when you come home, after you're out for errands or whatever, the more that you come see me soon after you get home, and show me just a few minutes of attention. That is, if I'm not on a call or in the middle of something, the more I feel loved. You see how that's not black and white. It's not like you don't do this, therefore I don't feel loved. It's like the more you do this, the more I'll feel loved. And the more that this happens, well, the less I'll feel loved. And oh, by the way, I would also like some more of this to happen. Some related. So this is a potential format for how to think about communicating. The more this happens, the more I'll feel loved. Well, doesn't she want to do that if that's what I expressed to her in a kind way? I'm not accusing her. I'm not, being negative. I'm just saying, hey, this would really make me feel loved. And by the way, when this happens, it kind of makes me feel less loved. So this is just a thought. I'm going to put out some things prior to next session.